says that she loves me. Isn't it lovely when the one you loving is the one you're loving?
And I want to have this conversation that you've been waiting for all day. So, all right, Smith, just play it. And wait, go ahead, play it.
I would not be surprised if we learned 20, 30 years from now that the domestic gender war was inspired by the FBI, just as the FBI gave birth to COINTELPRO back in the 70s and 60s to disrupt and destroy the credibility and success of Black liberation movements. I could very well see where COINTELPRO or something similar to it could have also been invented to turn the Black woman against the Black man and the Black man against the Black woman. The family is an institution, no different than SNCC, no different than CORE, no different than the Panthers, no different than the Garvey movement, no different than the Freedom Riders. But I really do believe that at some point, we're going to find out that the U.S. government had a hand in the gender wars and the promotion of it, because I don't think it's a coincidence that this Black male versus Black female gender war is being initiated at the very same time that the U.S. government is pushing transgenderism on elementary Black public school children.
Okay, now that last part I don't agree with, but the first part I agree with. But if you agree with the first part, maybe it's something to think about, right? Maybe but as I was listening to it, I was thinking that I'm listening to Gina Yashere, comedian, London comedian, really funny. She has a book called Cack-Handed, and she talks about joining the Nation of Islam. And it's fascinating, growing up in London and the racism, she gravitated towards this movement of pro-Black empowerment, do for yourself, bean pies, the whole, sister, brother, love, the whole thing. And she liked that. And then she brought up Yaqub. And I was laughing because, well, first of all, she's funny, but many of us, we can ignore the Yaqub thing. And it's like, we have this cognitive dissonance where we're like, okay, I love this message, but we just gonna, not talk about Yaqub. But shouldn't we though? I mean, I don't know. Do we discount the whole message? What are your thoughts?
He thinks that the FBI is behind everything. Like, didn't he also think that the FBI is behind homosexuality? Like,
yes,
you don't find that suspicious?
I do. Right.
He blames the FBI for a lot. I do too, racism. But that's a lot.
That's what I'm saying. We can take in. Let's chew up the meat. Go ahead.
Cognitive dissonance is exactly a correct term to use here, because it's like two. You want to agree, but then the other one is alternating. Like, what is he? And then the transgender children.
What do they got to do with it? Right? It's like, why can't people just stick to? Yeah, I don't know.
Why are you bringing the children in there? And especially so in my house, I have worked very hard with getting people in my house to use the terms transgender male, transgender woman, and not, oh, that's a boy, and all of those things, because I see these children in their struggles. I see them when they come into the emergency room and are trafficked, are involved in all types of trauma, neglect, being kicked out of their home and have to be hospitalized, suicide attempts. So I can't get with that. Now the gender wars, I have to see what Mr. Calloway thinks. I don't
want to talk about it. Okay, listen. Here was the impetus for this conversation. If I didn't live in Urban View and in Nubia, I would think that there is some sort of war going on between men and women in the Black community. But because I'm in them streets and I'm seeing people, I'm around folk, I don't see it, right? I don't see the conflict that is so prevalent on YouTube or social media and all of the little battles. It was just a video that I would not share because I don't participate in sharing algorithmic things. I'm not going to keep it going where this is why Black women are not attractive to date. There's like always these things. And then Black women then are going to come in and defend ourselves, of course, and then that foments this big fight. And you see it constantly, especially on social media, especially on YouTube. You can Google search right now. YouTube has and then the Kevin Samuels thing, right? So you think about, to me, he wasn't even on my radar. I didn't even know who he was practically until he died. You know what I'm saying? But that's because in my world, that's not the conflict. And I feel like maybe it's like a Yaqub kind of conversation that's being like this. Is something going on? Or is there something going on? And is it generational? I was talking to Don during the break. Maybe it's generational. We had this conversation at the last Foolishness Friday in Chicago, and a 33-year-old stood up and was like, yeah, among my peers, we're not having this conversation. I said, but you came to a comedy show on a Sunday night with your mama. You're not normal. You're not the regular guy that's out there. So you probably surround yourself with similar men. And usually if you're in those circles of people, you're not going to see it because that's not how y'all roll. But I am concerned at the number of Black women who are single, who don't want to be, who want to be in a relationship, who make compromises, who feel less desirable, who are going through this thing about how do they get into relationships, and all of the dating apps and the swiping left and right, and we are the least swiped in of all of the demographics. I just wish that we could have this conversation. And the brother called up and talked about Cornel West, right? Or you could talk about Byron Allen or Robert Smith III, or it's like all of the really truly successful Black men are not necessarily with Black women, and it financially it makes you say, well, is there something going on? And if there is, how do we fix this? Because I feel like we can't move forward if we're not moving forward as a unit so. That was the impetus, Don. So you don't have to talk about it.
No. Listen, I have been with you a long time and have not yet had to speak on either Kevin Samuels or Umar Johnson, Dr. Umar Johnson. So I guess every dog has his day. I can run no further.
Sorry.
Let's be honest about something. Globally and across racial categories in the United States, male isolation is real. The incel is a real thing. These are a generation of lonely and increasingly isolated males, particularly in the post-COVID era, who don't have those substantive interactions with other people who are unlike them, and who may be disappointed in themselves for some type of, career not looking like you thought it would, a romantic life or financial life not looking like you thought it would. And male isolation is real, and they are able to congregate now because of mass media, social media, tech that is able to shrink the world. And the problem in the African American community specifically is that it produces voices like a Kevin Samuels and a Dr. Umar, who happen to be educated, both of them happen to have been educated and uniquely articulate, but their fundamental premises are based in a very deep misogyny. And it's not even that far beneath the surface. But one of the challenges is that I do believe that, let's just talk about Dr. Umar, right? As opposed to my dearly departed frat brother, shout out to the Noops down in Tampa this week, Kevin Samuels, right? If you look at it, Dr. Umar, there is something in Dr. Umar's worldview that appeals to my soul because I can tell he deeply loves Black people. I can also tell he does not necessarily love every Black person beyond straight Black men equally. He is deeply misogynistic. His general Pan-African / patriarchy rolled into one. The theology fundamentally amounts to that women need to go back to the pre-gender war days and submit to the leadership of a male. That is not egalitarian. And fundamentally, it's not a reflection of someone who loves Black people enough to lead us towards the liberationist activity that we need. And the reality of the matter is that liberation is impossible without Black women. And it's impossible when we are pushing them to the back of any type of substantive movement. And so not only women, but obviously the LGBTQIA two-spirit plus community, he does not value them as much as he values heterosexual Black men in terms of their capacity to be a part of leadership in a liberated Black nation. Therefore, that's not somebody I can get behind, because you don't love all Black people easily. It's easy to love Don Calloway. The good brother Damon Jones writes a piece called Straight Black Men Are the White Men of Black Folks. Yes, it is true. I am extraordinarily privileged, right? So it's easy to love me. It's easy for Dave Chappelle to attack the trans community because it's easy to love Dave Chappelle, right? He is a rich, straight Black man who has created admirable progress for himself. But do you love the nigga on the corner who might be queer, wearing a t-shirt, trying to hustle, right? Do you love him? Do you love they? Do you love a Black person who has the audacity to identify as a they and confuse and disarm every human you might meet, right? Because you only ask to be called by your name, even if it's not what you look like or what you think I should look like to you, right? So until a leader emerges who loves all Black people equally, you should, and if someone says things like Kevin Samuels, like Brother Dr. Umar Johnson, who I think has a lot of value, but he's a hard no for me because of these reasons I'm articulating. But even for Brother Umar, who appeals to my straight Black male soul, and frankly, probably appeals to a lot of the Black nationalism in both of you all as educated sisters, we cannot elevate someone who is not willing to holistically love all Black people.
Dr. Danny's like, nope.
Theme.
Dr. Danny, before you respond, this is why I love having these conversations, because I never really knew, because we never really talked about this, Don, how much you care about all people. Do you know what I'm saying? Like there's certain assumptions you can make, frat, Morehouse, there's certain kind of, ways in which brothers roll, and it feeds on itself, much like an incel, in the sense that there's an agreement within the group about, how much misogyny you're going to accept, whether you're going to check and challenge people. Yeah. And it is the responsibility of the people inside the group to check everyone in the group to behave a certain kind of way. And if you're not in the barbershop when the talk is happening, when the little boys are in the seat saying, no, that's not how you talk about women. If women are bitches and hoes in the barbershop, they're going to be bitches and hoes when the young men grow up, right? And that's where the culture is formed. So it is incumbent upon us to have these conversations, to have them honestly, not just to have the ones that make you feel good. And it's like, locker room talk should never exist really among us. Like we shouldn't have a space where we can demean other groups of us, right? Even if it's comfortable in spaces. So I appreciate you so much for saying all of that. Dr. Danny was like, I don't agree with him though on the.
Oh, no.
You're
I
on board?
agree with him. I agree with him on most of it. I can't agree on what I would like to identify and get behind him in any way whatsoever, Dr. Umar, because as I was saying, I didn't even realize he was actually a psychologist or a doctor of anything other than trolling up until about an hour ago. But it's divisive. So my issue is it's divisive, and it's really mucking up theories, because yes, Pan-Africanism is going back, loving where you came from, Sankofa, ending even in their own way, ending generational trauma by addressing things and knowing where you're from. That's what Pan-Africanism is supposed to be about. But now you're mixing in your own views by trying to act like it also means having problems with people from the LGBTQIA folks. It also seems like, we're having a different level on equity for men and women. But if we actually do go back to Africa and look, we see that there are tribes where women are the leaders. We see that there are kings who are women, female kings. We saw the movie with Viola, thank you. But also in Ghana, there have been female kings. It's been something that's been passed down. So I don't appreciate Dr. Umar because he only loves a family that looks like this. Like, I only love a family that has a male dominant figure with a submissive or agreeable woman, but I can't love a family that looks differently. I can't love a family with a they. I can't love a family with two moms. I can't love a family with someone who's fluid. I can't love a family with someone who has a woman who is the breadwinner. I can't love a family unless it looks and fits this model. And then I perpetuate these lies that these models fit Pan-Africanism or that these models are Black nationalism when they're not. So I cannot get behind him. I grew up in a household where my father went to the Million Man March, right? And I was like, this is awesome. Like, for him to tell me all about this and all these Black men. And I was like, Farrakhan, and listening to him, I was like, this is cool. Like, I really think, I told my dad, I was like, I feel like we should become a part of the Nation of Islam. And then I learned that I have to walk some steps behind a man and I can't walk next to him. And I was like, never mind. No, that is not for me. And I realized that when I was 8 or 9 years old. So I can appreciate a Black leader. I can appreciate the activism. However, you are mucking it up and you're not telling the truth and you're confusing people. And then you're showing that on social media. And we know that everyone is looking at social media, as we just said, in the time of YouTube, COVID, if you want to say it's post-COVID, some people think the pandemic is over, I know, that you now have people congregating and jumping on these ideas and perpetuating them. And no, I can't get behind that, but I agree with all the other things from Mr. Calloway.
Well, no, please stop it, Dr. Hairston. I'm done. Let's talk about. So I operate in the universe of governance and practitioner government. Let's imagine that those who believe in Dr. Umar and are inspired by his articulate Black nationalism, which is very real and very valuable. Let's just say we give Dr. Umar the keys to the Wakandan ship, right? He's in charge. He is King T'Challa. Would the gay Black boy at his school be treated properly? Would Dr. Umar Venture Capital invest in a woman-owned business or a business that centered womanist leadership? Would Dr. Umar grant the tax exemption to the church that's led by feminist theologian sisters who are out there, like Dr. Nichelle Gidger-Jones? I can't trust you to love Black people, therefore I cannot trust you to lead Black people, right? Because it will not be done fairly and egalitarianly, and we will end up with the striated society that we have right now, but with a whole bunch of more melanated folks. And that's something we can't afford.
Let that be the litmus test. If you can't be trusted to love Black people, you cannot be trusted to lead Black people. All Black people.
All of the Black people.
All Black people. All Black people. I think that should be the litmus test for anybody who wants to walk in leadership. Anybody that wants our support for anything, that should be the litmus test. Because the reality is, even if you are anti-homosexuality and you think it's a sin, or you don't understand the non-binary or all of the letters, if you don't understand any of that, then don't do it, right? But you certainly have people in your family that have, these leanings, that are gay, that are non-binary, whether they express it or not. So if you are willing to throw away your family for your ideals, and if your ideals are rooted in Christianity, which should be love at the forefront and the foundation of everything, that is not very loving. So you have to now challenge your very Christianity, your very Christian walk. So I feel like there's a lot of work to be done, which is why I brought in this conversation. This is not about Dr. Umar. This is not even about men and women. This is about our capacity to love one another, to get to a place where we can be whole in ourselves and then whole collectively. Because if we don't get this, and I've been saying this is not going to end well. Like, we have to get this part. And to that point, the reason why I brought in his conversation, I do believe that there are forces creating and using spaces to, whether it's the Russians that definitely meddled in the elections and targeted Black people and hit a sore spot around, racism, just like in World War II, the pamphlets that came down from Hitler and them and Mussolini and them targeting Black people because they know that this is a pressure point in this country. I feel like this is a pressure point right now that somebody is exploiting and is building a deeper wedge, and coming upon us to be fiercely, hunkering down around fighting against it. Like, we have to be fierce opponents of the narratives. So that's how I feel.
I run my fingers through her hair as she smiles and says that she loves me. Isn't it lovely when the one you're lusting is the one